Hello, I'm Donald Hall, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and a member of the International Advisory Board of IAFOR, the International Academic Forum. I'm here today in Kobe, Japan at the 2015 Joint Conference of the Asian Studies and Cultural Studies Associations. And I'm joined by Gerard Goggin, who is Professor of Media and Communication at the University of Sydney. He was a keynote presenter at this year's conference. Welcome, Professor Goggin.
Thank you very much, Donald.
I take it this is your first IAFOR conference, and perhaps you can tell us first a bit about your general impressions of the conference and your experience of it so far.
Yes, it is my first IAFOR conference, and it's been really terrific. It's been really, very interesting indeed, getting to meet people from a whole range of different places around the world. And I think people from different disciplines as well, and also different sectors, and to really focus on these topics of human rights in particular, and culture and justice and media. And so I found it very interesting. It's not your usual suspects, as it were. It's actually new people building bridges, I suppose, with each other. So it's been great.
And has there been anything in particular you've learned or that has surprised you so far in the conference?
I think what has really surprised me is the way that it has brought people, I think, from different geographical locations and different cultures to bear. That I think sometimes in the academic settings or even the conferences or meetings we go to, we may not realise it, but we see people from some parts of the world and not others. And here I think it's very interesting to see the range of particularly scholars from across Asia. I mean, it's clearly an Asian Studies conference, but nonetheless, there's something of people. It's not just perhaps one or two representatives either. It's a number of scholars presenting, very kind of multiple perspectives on different topics. So I found that very surprising.
Well, I very much enjoyed your keynote address on the first day of the conference, and I'm wondering for those viewers who were not there, if you could tell us a little bit about what you were discussing in terms of the internet and human rights.
Sure. Look, and thank you very much. It was a terrific opening to the conference, and I suppose one of the things that struck me about this conference and human rights is the centrality of the internet to the topic of human rights. And I suppose the ways in which people who are working on human rights across different settings, whether they're activists or policymakers or they're scholars, they're now having to try and understand what's the place of this technology in this whole project, I suppose, about justice, about making the world a fairer place that's widely shared. And so I come from media studies, and I've worked on technology, been fascinated in it for a long time, but I thought this would be something to explore. And so this was what I was exploring in my keynote address. And I suppose what struck me about this conference too was the location and the nature of it, being in Asia, that I wanted to share with people work we'd been doing about the development of the internet in Asia, about its particular histories, and then the very particular, I think, and very interesting forms of activism that come from that. So that's what I was talking about in the keynote, and I really find it incredibly interesting, and have heard from just talking to people and hearing presentations at the conference, there's a lot of people working on aspects of trying to understand in our contemporary media environment, what can we do with the internet? How can we, I suppose, harvest some of its benefits and then deal with aspects of what are its dark sides, the sense in which the internet is used for violation of human rights as well, which is a very disturbing kind of topic.
Yes. Well, I know you're also involved in a broad Asia-Pacific media project. I believe that was the last panel that you chaired that I went to. Could you tell us a little bit about that work?
Yeah, I've been really fortunate in being able to work with a great team of collaborators doing a project that looks at the histories of the internet in Australia, so my own country, in China, which is a fascinating place in terms of development of the internet, in Japan, and also in Korea. And I suppose the idea of that is to take seriously the proposition that although the internet is a global technology, it's actually shaped still in very local and regional contexts. So our project tries to look at the way that the internet emerged across these 4 countries, but particularly to look at what were the cultural and social and political dynamics and the particularities of those contexts which gave rise to the internets, the kind of plurality of internets that we see, not just in this region, but we think in some ways the work we're doing can inform a better understanding of the internet globally.
Very good. I think it's always interesting to hear how people come to their set of research interests. So take us back in time.
Sure.
How did this emerge as something that you found fascinating?
Yeah.
And tell us about the progression of your research.
Well, in the 1990s, I was actually doing a PhD on English literature on the Romanticism period. I was looking at gender and sexuality in the work of Mary Wollstonecraft and Percy Bysshe Shelley and famous writers like this in the 1790s and 1820s in England. And I finished my PhD in rural Australia, countercultural region called Byron Bay region in Australia. And there weren't any jobs, funnily enough, in 18th or 19th century literature, but there were jobs in media studies. Wow. And then my other life actually had been working in telecommunications policy, which is what I didn't have a scholarship, I just did this work. And so then I was able to bring it together. And then when I had a job teaching media and cultural studies, I suppose in the end, I became increasingly interested in the internet. And it was an accident of place, like many accidents. I think nowadays often professors are enjoined to mentor younger scholars and help them construct great strategic plans for how they map out their career, but a lot of it's an accident. And in my case, this place in Byron Bay was one of the places that invented the internet in Australia, that they had some bunch of countercultural progressive people who invented the internet. I got interested in that. And I got interested in the historical dimension, the critical dimension, because I'd also been involved in technology debates and policies, and I was getting a bit sick of the idea that the technology was the saviour, was the solution for everything. And so for me, the historical work is about providing resources to reimagine actually the present.
Well, I'd like you to maybe look to the future a bit.
Yes.
What, especially when we're talking about the internet and the various forms of social media, what do you see as issues and challenges that concern you looking forward, and what potentials do you see?
It's an incredibly important question. I suppose the first thing is about the struggles around the technology itself, because now the internet, I suppose, is an inheritance for all of us. We rely on it, most of us, in our everyday lives in different dimensions. Not everything around, centres on the internet, but it's incredibly important for us. And so I think, one big challenge, a threshold challenge, is about the democratic governing of the internet. And people are talking about this now. There's a Delhi Declaration on the Internet calling for a free and equitable internet, and people are saying the internet we want. And I think one of the problems with the internet is that at various times the we in the internet has been narrower or wider. So I think this is a big struggle for our time, to put the internet in the hands and in the service of everyone, and that's a very complex kind of process. And I suppose the second thing is that, particularly when we think of human rights, it strikes me that it's been a bit tilted in some ways against people who are trying to activate human rights, as our friend Baden Offord terms it.
Yes.
That I'm really interested in the possibilities, and I think there's a great need to give people who are working around human rights more resources, more tools, more training. And that's really important, because lots of funds get sunk into, startups of the internet and apps for commercial purposes, and there's not so much money that's actually, and resources, or even attention given. And attention, I think, is a scarce resource in a world that for many people can be, not all people, we know for a lot of people it's not a media environment of plenty, but for many people it is, and intention's important. So I think there's a shifting of the balance. We need to get the tools, and we need to get the internet more into the hands of people, working on human rights to amplify it as a tool for freedom, I suppose.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. And as simply a final question, do you imagine you'll return to IAFOR conferences in the future?
I would love to. I think it's a unique space that, one of the things I suppose is often we're working on quite particular trajectories. We have a focus on making a contribution to the field. We need to work in disciplining ways, and one of the things about IAFOR I like is not necessarily the undisciplined, it has disciplines of its own, but
Yes.
but the unsettling, it offers a space, I think, for the tying of new knots, new ways to actually forge bridges and connections across the worlds of knowledge. And that's really important, not just for those of us who work in universities, but I think to ensure that ideas can make a contribution to practice, to business, to government, to
Yes.
a range of things.
Well, thank you. I hope to see you here in Kobe next year.
Thank you.
I'll certainly be here, so I'll look for you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
And for all of you who would be interested in learning more about IAFOR, please visit our website at iafor.org to learn about upcoming conferences and other activities. Thank you, and thank you, Professor Goggin.
Thank you very much, Tom.